Aboard the opulent Sapphire Yacht, a lavish weekend turns deadly when Sir Reginald Ashburn is found shot, his revolver in hand, in a locked cabin. Was it suicide or a cunning murder? Hercule Poirot, the brilliant Belgian detective, unravels a web of secrets, lies, and hidden motives among a cast of suspects, each with something to hide. From a cryptic note to a lipstick-stained cigarette, every clue counts in this closed-circle mystery. Will Poirot's little gray cells uncover the killer before the yacht reaches shore? Dive into a tale of deception where no one is what they seem. Chapter 1. The Invitation to the Sapphire Yacht. The late summer sun hung low over the English Channel, casting a golden sheen across the gentle waves that lapped against the hull of the Sapphire Yacht. The vessel, a marvel of polished teak and gleaming brass, bobbed gracefully at its mooring in the small, picturesque harbor of Saint-Lys, a coastal village known for its discreet charm and the patronage of the wealthy. The yacht belonged to Sir Reginald Ashburn, a retired industrialist whose fortune in steel had afforded him both this floating palace and a reputation for lavish hospitality. Tonight, the Sapphire Yacht was to host a select gathering of guests, each invited for a weekend of leisure, fine dining, and, as it would soon transpire, something far more sinister. Captain Arthur Hastings, ever the loyal friend and chronicler of Hercule Poirot's exploits, stood on the quayside, adjusting his tie and squinting against the glare of the water. He had received an unexpected invitation from Sir Reginald, a man he barely knew, though their acquaintance had been forged during a brief encounter at a London charity gala. The invitation, penned in Sir Reginald's precise hand, had promised a weekend of unparalleled elegance aboard his yacht, with a guest list that included names of note from London's high society. Hastings, ever susceptible to the allure of a grand occasion, had accepted with enthusiasm, though he could not shake a vague unease. There was something about the invitation's tone, too insistent, too polished, that struck him as peculiar. As he boarded the yacht via a polished gangplank, Hastings was greeted by a steward in crisp whites, who ushered him into the main saloon. The room was a vision of opulence. Crystal chandeliers swayed gently with the motion of the sea. Mahogany paneling gleamed under soft lighting, and a long dining table was set with silver and porcelain that sparkled like the stars beginning to emerge in the evening sky. The other guests were already assembling, their voices a low hum of polite conversation, punctuated by the clink of champagne flutes. Sir Reginald Ashburn, a robust man in his late 50s, with a beauty despite her 40 years, her auburn hair swept into an elegant chignon, her green eyes sharp and watchful. She wore a gown of emerald silk that caught the light, and her demeanor suggested both warmth and a certain guardedness, as though she were playing a part she had rehearsed many times. Among the guests, Hastings noted a diverse assembly. There was Dr. Leonard Crane, a Harley Street physician with a reputation for discretion and a penchant for collecting rare coins, his thin frame and sharp features giving him the air of a man who missed nothing. Beside him stood Miss Clara Pembroke, a young heiress whose fortune in textiles had made her a target of both suitors and scandal. Her laughter was bright, but her eyes darted nervously, as though she expected some unseen threat. Then there was Mr. Victor Grayson, a stockbroker with a booming voice and a habit of tapping his gold pocket watch, his joviality masking a rumored ruthlessness in business. His wife, Mrs. Evelyn Grayson, was a quiet, pale woman who seemed to shrink in his shadow, her fingers twisting a lace handkerchief. The final guest to catch Hastings' eye was Mr. Julian Merriweather, a playwright of modest fame, whose sharp wit and penchant for gossip made him a fixture in London's literary circles. His dark eyes sparkled with mischief, and he was already regaling Miss Pembroke with a story that made her blush.
The crew, too, was present. Crichton Mortimer, a grizzled seafarer who commanded the yacht with quiet competence, and Miss Ellen Tate, the stewardess, whose youthful energy and quick smile belied a certain wariness in her movements. As the evening progressed, the guests settled into a rhythm of polite conversation, though Hastings could not help but notice undercurrents of tension. Sir Reginald's joviality seemed forced, his eyes often straying to his wife, who avoided his gaze. Miss Pembroke laughed too loudly at Mr. Merryweather's jests, while Dr. Crane watched the room with a clinical detachment. Mrs. Grayson barely spoke, her hands trembling slightly as she sipped her champagne. Only Mr. Grayson seemed entirely at ease, his loud anecdotes dominating the table. Dinner was a sumptuous affair: lobster bisque, roasted pheasant, and a chocolate soufflé that melted on the tongue. Yet, as the meal drew to a close, Sir Reginald rose, tapping his glass with a spoon. The room fell silent, and his smile faltered.
"My dear friends,"
he began, his voice steady but laced with an odd intensity.
"I have gathered you here not only for pleasure, but for a purpose. There is a matter of great importance I must address, one that concerns us all. But first, let us enjoy the evening. Tomorrow at noon I shall make an announcement that will clarify certain matters."
A murmur rippled through the guests. Hastings frowned, sensing a shift in the atmosphere.
Merryweather, who raised an eyebrow. Mr. Grayson laughed, breaking the tension, but his wife's face grew paler still. As the party dispersed to the deck for after-dinner drinks, Hastings lingered, watching the guests. The sea was calm, the stars bright overhead, yet he felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. He could not shake the feeling that Sir Reginald's announcement would alter the course of the weekend, and not for the better. It was then that he decided to send a telegram to Hercule Poirot. The little Belgian detective, with his fastidious habits and uncanny insight, had a knack for unraveling mysteries before they fully revealed themselves. Hastings penned a brief message, entrusting it to the steward to be sent from the yacht's radio room. "Poirot, my friend, join me aboard the Sapphire yacht at St. Lys. A curious gathering, and I sense trouble brewing. Your gray cells may be needed. Hastings." As he handed the note to the steward, Hastings glanced back at the saloon, where Sir Reginald was speaking in low tones to his wife. Her face was a mask of controlled anger, and for a moment their eyes met. Hastings looked away, unsettled. The night passed uneventfully, or so it seemed. The guests retired to their cabins, the yacht rocked gently on the waves, and the stars wheeled overhead. But at precisely 6:47 a.m., as the first light of dawn crept across the horizon, a scream shattered the silence. It came from the master cabin, where Sir Reginald Ashbourne lay dead, a single gunshot wound to his temple, his revolver clutched in his lifeless hand. The Sapphire yacht, now a floating prison, was no longer a haven of luxury. It was a stage for murder, and the curtain had just risen. Hastings, roused by the scream, hurried to the scene, his heart pounding. The master cabin was a scene of controlled chaos. Lady Beatrice stood trembling, her face ashen. Dr. Crane was already examining the body, his expression grim, and Captain Mortimer barked orders to secure the deck. The other guests gathered in the corridor, their faces a mix of shock and suspicion. Hastings' mind raced. Had Sir Reginald taken his own life? The revolver in his hand suggested as much, but something about the scene felt wrong. The angle of the wound, the untouched glass of brandy on the bedside table, the faint scent of perfume that lingered in the air. He needed Poirot, and he needed him now. As the yacht's radio crackled with the news of the tragedy, Hastings could only hope his friend would arrive before the truth slipped further into the shadows. For aboard the Sapphire yacht, secrets were as plentiful as the stars above, and someone had ensured that Sir Reginald would never reveal his. Chapter 2. The Scene of the Crime. The morning air aboard the Sapphire yacht was heavy with the tang of salt and the weight of tragedy. The once inviting vessel, its polished decks gleaming under the rising sun, now felt like a gilded cage, its beauty marred.
The grim reality of Sir Reginald Ashburn's death.
Captain Arthur Hastings stood in the corridor outside the master cabin, his mind a whirl of questions as the other guests hovered nearby, their faces etched with shock, fear, and something less definable, perhaps guilt. The scream that had pierced the dawn, later confirmed to be Lady Beatrice's, still echoed in his ears, and the image of Sir Reginald's lifeless form haunted his thoughts. The master cabin, where the body still lay, was a study in opulence now tainted by violence. The room was spacious, with a wide porthole offering a view of the calm sea, a four-poster bed draped in silk, and a mahogany desk cluttered with papers and a crystal decanter of brandy. Sir Reginald's body was slumped in a leather armchair by the bedside, his head tilted at an unnatural angle, a revolver in his right hand, and a single, neat bullet wound in his temple. The scene suggested suicide, yet Hastings, with his years of observing Hercule Poirot's methods, sensed an undercurrent of artifice. Something was amiss, though he could not yet pinpoint what. Captain Mortimer, the yacht's grizzled commander, had taken charge with military precision, ordering the crew to seal the cabin and prevent anyone from entering until the authorities could be summoned. But the Sapphire yacht was anchored far from Senlis, and the nearest police launch would not arrive for hours. The radio had been sent, but the isolation of the vessel meant that for now the guests and crew were trapped together, bound by suspicion and the unspoken fear that a murderer walked among them. Hastings glanced at the assembled group. Lady Beatrice, her emerald gown replaced by a somber black dress, stood apart, her eyes red-rimmed, but her posture rigid, as though determined to maintain her dignity. Dr. Leonard Crane, the physician, had taken it upon himself to examine the body briefly before being ushered out, and now he stood with his arms crossed, his sharp eyes scanning the others. Miss Clara Pembroke clutched a handkerchief, her youthful face pale, while Mr. Victor Grayson, the stockbroker, muttered about the damned inconvenience of it all, his booming voice subdued for once. His wife, Mrs. Evelyn Grayson, seemed on the verge of collapse, her hands trembling as she clung to her husband's arm. Mr. Julian Merriweather, the playwright, leaned against the wall, his usual smirk replaced by a thoughtful frown, as though he were scripting the scene in his mind. Miss Ellen Tate, the stewardess, hovered at the edge of the group, her quick movements stilled by the weight of the moment. Hastings' thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps on the deck above. He looked up to see a small, impeccably dressed Poirot called, his voice warm but tinged with urgency as he reached the corridor. "You have summoned me to a most intriguing affair, n'est-ce pas? A death aboard a yacht, and such a splendid one. But tell me, what has occurred?" Hastings, relieved beyond measure, quickly recounted the morning's events. The scream at 6:47 a.m., the discovery of Sir Reginald's body, the revolver, the locked cabin, and the unsettling atmosphere among the guests. Poirot listened intently, his head tilted slightly, his fingers steepled before him as though already arranging the facts in his mind. "Bon," Poirot said at last, his green eyes narrowing. "A death that appears as suicide. Yet you, my dear Hastings, sense otherwise. This is good. The instincts, they are often correct, even if they lack the precision of the little grey cells. Let us see this scene for ourselves." Captain Mortimer, initially resistant, relented under Poirot's calm authority, allowing the detective and Hastings to enter the master cabin. The door, which had been locked from the inside and forced open by the crew, swung inward, revealing the grim tableau once more. Poirot moved with deliberate care, his small frame seeming to fill the room with quiet command. He circled the body, his eyes darting from the revolver to the wound, from the brandy decanter to the papers on the desk, and finally to the porthole which was securely latched. "Observe, Hastings," Poirot said, pointing to the revolver in Sir Reginald's hand. "The grip? It is firm, yes? As though he held it with purpose. Yet the angle of the wound? It is curious. A man who shoots himself does not always hold the weapon so precisely, no? And this brandy, untouched, why pour a glass and not drink?" Hastings frowned, following Poirot's gaze. "You think it's staged?" Poirot raised a finger. "I think nothing yet, mon ami. I observe. The truth, it reveals itself in the details. Now, let us consider the time. The scream was heard at 6:47 a.m., oui? And the shot itself, when was it fired?" Hastings hesitated. "No one reported hearing a shot. The scream woke everyone, but the gunshot, it must have been earlier." "Précisément," Poirot murmured, his eyes gleaming. "A shot in the night, unheard. Or perhaps muffled? We must establish the alibis of all aboard. But first, the scene itself speaks. Regardez, the papers on the desk. They are disturbed, as though someone searched in haste. And this." He bent down, retrieving a small object from beneath the armchair, a pearl earring, its luster catching the light. Hastings gasped. "That could belong to Lady Beatrice. She was wearing pearls last night." "Perhaps," Poirot said, slipping the earring into a handkerchief. "But we do not assume." His manner gentle, but probing. "Madam, my deepest condolences. May I ask when you last saw your husband alive?" Lady Beatrice's voice was steady, though her eyes flickered. "Last night, after dinner. He was preoccupied. He said he had papers to review and retired early, around 10 o'clock. I went to my own cabin." "And this morning?" Poirot pressed. "You discovered him?" She nodded, her lips tightening. "I woke early, around 6:30. I went to his cabin to discuss a private matter. The door was locked, but I had a key. When I entered, I found him like that. I screamed. I couldn't help it." Poirot's eyes softened, but his questions did not. "And the revolver, madam? It was his?" "Yes," she said quickly. "He kept it in his desk. For protection, he said, though I never understood why." Poirot nodded, filing the information away. He then turned to Captain Mortimer, who confirmed that the yacht had been anchored all night, with no one leaving or boarding. The crew had been on duty, but none had seen anything unusual until the scream. As Poirot began to question the other guests, Hastings watched, marveling at the detective's ability to draw out details with seemingly innocuous remarks. Dr. Crane admitted to hearing the scream, but claimed to have been in his cabin reading. Miss Pembroke said she had been asleep, though her nervous fidgeting suggested otherwise. Mr. Grayson blustered about being woken by the noise, while Mrs. Grayson whispered that she had taken a sleeping draught and heard nothing. Mr. Merriweather, with a wry smile, said he had been on deck, enjoying a cigarette, but saw no one else. Miss Tate, the stewardess, was the last to be questioned. Her voice was soft, almost hesitant. "I was in the galley, preparing breakfast trays, sir. I heard the scream and ran to the corridor. That's all I know." Poirot thanked her, his expression unreadable. As the guests dispersed, he drew Hastings aside. "Mon ami, this is no simple suicide. The earring, the untouched brandy, the locked door, these are pieces of a puzzle. But the greatest clue is the silence of the shot. We must learn who was where and when. And we must watch, for the murderer is still among us." Hastings nodded, his unease growing. The Sapphire Yacht was a closed world, its secrets locked tighter than the cabin door. But with Poirot's grey cells at work, the truth could not remain hidden for long. Chapter 3: The Arrival of Hercule Poirot. The Sapphire Yacht rocked gently on the waves, its elegance now overshadowed by the grim chaos. The little Belgian detective, with his immaculate suit and piercing green eyes, seemed an island of calm amidst the storm, his mind already at work, unraveling the threads of the mystery. Poirot had insisted on a thorough examination of the yacht before proceeding with further interviews, and now he stood on the upper deck, surveying the vessel with the precision of a watchmaker. The Sapphire Yacht was a marvel of design. 3 decks, a main saloon, a dining room, a small library, and a dozen cabins, including the master suite where Sir Reginald had met his end. The crew's quarters were below, accessible by a narrow staircase, and the engine room hummed quietly at the stern. The yacht was anchored a mile from Senlis, isolated from the world, its radio the only link to the mainland until the police launch arrived. "Mon ami," Poirot said, turning to Hastings. "This yacht, it is a perfect stage for murder, n'est-ce pas? A closed circle. No one enters, no one leaves. The solution lies here, among these people, in the details they reveal and those they conceal." Hastings nodded, though his mind was still reeling from the morning's events. "But Poirot, if it's not suicide, how could someone have shot Sir Reginald without being heard? And the locked door, how did they get in and out?" Poirot's moustache twitched with a hint of a smile. "Patience, Hastings. The answers, they come not from questions alone, but from observation. Let us return to the cabin. There is more to learn." They descended to the master cabin, where the body had been covered with a sheet at Poirot's request, pending the arrival of the authorities. The room was as they had left it, the revolver still in Sir Reginald's hand, the brandy decanter untouched, the papers on the desk in disarray. Poirot moved with deliberate care, his small hands gloved to avoid disturbing evidence. He knelt by the armchair, examining the floor, then rose to inspect the porthole once more. "Regardez, Hastings," he said, pointing to the porthole's latch. "It is secure, oui, but the seal around the glass, it is worn, slightly loose. A possibility, perhaps, though not for a man of Sir Reginald's size to pass through, but for something smaller. A weapon? A hand?" Hastings frowned. "You think the shot came from outside?" Poirot raised a finger. "I speculate nothing yet. I note only what is before me. Now, these papers." He turned to the desk. "A pocket. But a threat is only a clue, not a solution. We must know to whom it was addressed and by whom it was written. Now let us speak with the others. Their alibis, their secrets, they will tell us more." The guests were gathered in the saloon, their earlier shock giving way to a tense silence. Lady Beatrice sat by a window, her face composed but her fingers twisting a pearl necklace. Hastings noted with a start that one earring was missing, matching the one Poirot had found. Dr. Leonard Crane stood near the bar, sipping a glass of water, his sharp eyes following Poirot's every move. Miss Clara Pembroke was seated beside Mr. Julian Merriweather, who was sketching idly on a napkin, his expression unreadable. Mr. Victor Grayson paced the room, his gold watch clicking open and shut, while Mrs. Evelyn Grayson sat motionless, her eyes fixed on the floor. Miss Ellen Tate, the stewardess, hovered near the door, her youthful face pale but alert. Poirot addressed the group with his characteristic courtesy, though his tone carried an edge of authority. "Mesdames et messieurs, a tragedy has occurred, and it is my duty to uncover the truth. Sir Reginald Ashbourne is dead, and while the scene suggests suicide, there are inconsistencies. I ask for your cooperation. Each of you will account for your movements from last night until the scream at 6:47 this morning. Let us begin with you, Lady Beatrice." Lady Beatrice stiffened, her voice low but clear. "I told you, Monsieur Poirot, I retired to my cabin after dinner, around 10. I slept until 6:30, when I went to Reginald's cabin, and found him." "And you heard nothing in the night? No shot, no voices?" Poirot's eyes were gentle but unrelenting. "Nothing," she said, though her gaze flickered to the floor. "I sleep soundly." Poirot nodded, turning to Dr. Crane. "And you, Doctor?" Crane adjusted his glasses, his voice calm. "I was in my cabin reading a medical journal until midnight. I heard nothing until the scream woke me. I went to the master cabin and confirmed Sir Reginald was dead. A single gunshot to the temple." Poirot's eyes narrowed slightly. "You examined the body immediately, oui? Did you notice anything unusual?" Crane hesitated, then shook his head. "Only that the wound was clean, precise. The revolver was his, as Lady Beatrice said." Poirot moved on to Miss Pembroke, who clutched her handkerchief tightly. "I was in my cabin all night," she said, her voice trembling. I took a sedative to sleep. The sea makes me nervous. I heard nothing until the scream." Mr. Merriweather next offered a wry smile. "I was on deck until nearly 1, smoking and enjoying the stars. I saw no one, heard nothing but the waves. Then I slept until the commotion." Mr. Grayson snorted, his voice loud in the quiet room. "Hear a thing until that blasted scream." Mrs. Grayson nodded faintly, her voice barely audible. "I took a sleeping draught, as I often do. I heard nothing." Miss Tate, the stewardess, spoke last, her hands clasped tightly. "I was in the crew's quarters until 5, then in the galley preparing breakfast. I didn't hear a shot, only Lady Beatrice's scream." Poirot listened to each account, his face impassive, though Hastings could see the wheels turning in his mind. When the interviews concluded, he thanked the group and drew Hastings aside. "Mon ami," he said softly, "the alibis are neat. Too neat, perhaps. Each claims to have heard nothing, yet a revolver's loud, even in a storm. And this note," he patted his pocket, "it speaks of knowledge and regret. We must learn what Sir Reginald intended to announce today. That, I suspect, is the key." As they returned to the deck, Hastings noticed a small object glinting near the railing. A cigarette butt, its tip stained with a faint trace of lipstick. He pointed it out to Poirot, who picked it up with a handkerchief, his eyes gleaming. "Another detail, Hastings. Lipstick. Yet none of the ladies admit to being on deck last night. Curious, none. We must watch and listen. The truth, it hides in the contradictions." The day wore on, the yacht a floating prison under the weight of suspicion. Poirot's presence was a beacon, but Hastings knew the little detective's work had only begun. Somewhere among the polished surfaces and polite facades, a murderer lurked, and the Sapphire yacht held secrets that would not stay buried for long. Chapter 4. The Questions Begin. The Sapphire yacht seemed to hold its breath as the sun climbed toward noon, its rays glinting off the polished brass fittings and casting long, wavering shadows across the deck. The air was thick with tension, the guests moving with the cautious deliberation of those who knew they were under scrutiny. Hercule Poirot, undeterred by the oppressive atmosphere, had taken up residence in the yacht's small library, a mahogany-paneled room, lined with leather-bound volumes and a single porthole that framed the endless sea beyond. Here, he had declared, he would conduct his interviews, for it was in the quiet exchange of words that the truth often revealed itself. Captain Arthur Hastings stood by the door, his role as Poirot's confidant and observer firmly established. He watched as Poirot arranged a small table with a notebook, a fountain pen, and a silver cigarette case, a prop, Hastings knew, to set his subjects at ease. The detective's moustache was impeccably waxed, his suit pressed to perfection, and his green eyes gleamed with the quiet intensity.
Interviews, they are not merely questions. They are a dance, a pas de deux between the truth and the lie. We must watch not only what is said, but what is not said. The glance, the hesitation, the gesture that betrays.
Hastings nodded, though he privately wondered how Poirot could discern so much from so little. Who do we start with, then? Poirot's lips twitched. We begin with the one who has the most to lose, Lady Beatrice Ashbourne. Lady Beatrice entered the library with the grace of a woman accustomed to scrutiny, her black dress a stark contrast to the vivid emerald she had worn the previous night. Her face was composed, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of unease as she took the chair opposite Poirot. Hastings noted the absence of her pearl earring, the mate to the one found in the master cabin, and wondered if Poirot would confront her about it. "Madame," Poirot began, his voice soft but precise, "you have suffered a great loss, yet I must ask you to recount the events of last night once more. Every detail, it matters. When did you last speak with your husband?" Lady Beatrice's fingers tightened on her handbag. "As I told you, Monsieur Poirot, it was after dinner, around 10. Reginald seemed distracted. He mentioned papers he needed to review and retired to his cabin. I went to mine." "And these papers," Poirot said, leaning forward slightly, "did he speak of their nature? A business matter, perhaps? Or something more personal?" She hesitated, her gaze drifting to the porthole. "He didn't say. Reginald was private about his affairs, even with me. I assumed it was business. His steel empire always consumed him." Poirot nodded, jotting a note. "And this morning you entered his cabin with your key? Why did you visit so early?" Lady Beatrice's lips pressed into a thin line. "I wished to discuss a matter with him. A private matter, as I said. It was urgent. Urgent enough to wake him at 6:30. Poirot's tone was gentle, but his eyes were sharp. She flushed slightly. "Yes, but I found him. As you saw, I didn't touch anything, only screamed." Poirot paused, then produced the pearl earring from his pocket, holding it delicately between gloved fingers. "This, madame, was found beneath your husband's chair. It is yours, no?" Lady Beatrice's eyes widened, but she recovered quickly. "It must have fallen yesterday evening. I was in his cabin briefly before dinner, adjusting my jewelry. I didn't notice it was missing." "I've told you what I know, Monsieur Poirot," he said. "I was reading until midnight, then slept until the scream. I examined the body and confirmed the cause of death." Poirot's eyes narrowed.
You are a physician, doctor. Tell me, the wound, was it consistent with suicide? Crane adjusted his glasses. The bullet entered the right temple at close range, consistent with a self-inflicted wound. The revolver was in his hand, correctly positioned, but he hesitated, then continued. The angle was slightly unusual, higher than typical for a suicide. I couldn't say definitively without a full autopsy. Poirot's mustache twitched. And the time of death? You examined him immediately, oui? Within minutes, Crane said. Rigor mortis had not yet set in, suggesting death within the hour, likely between 5:47 and 6:47 a.m. Poirot made a note. And you heard no shot? None, Crane said firmly. The yacht is well insulated, and my cabin is on the opposite side. As Crane left, Poirot turned to Hastings. The doctor, he is precise, but he holds something back. His hesitation about the wound, it speaks volumes. Miss Clara Pembroke was next, her youthful energy subdued by the weight of the morning. She twisted her handkerchief as she spoke, her voice soft. I was in my cabin all night, Monsieur Poirot. I took a sedative, as I told you. The sea, it unsettles me. I heard nothing until Lady Beatrice's scream. Poirot's eyes softened. Mademoiselle, you were close to Sir Reginald, perhaps? A family friend? She blushed, looking away. He was kind to me, yes. My father knew him through business, but I barely saw him last night. And this sedative, Poirot said, it was prescribed? Yes, by my doctor in London, she said quickly. I keep it in my cabin. Poirot nodded, dismissing her gently. As she left, he murmured to Hastings, The young lady, she is nervous. Perhaps it is only grief, but perhaps it is fear. Mr. Victor Grayson entered with his usual bluster, his gold watch clicking as he sat. This is nonsense, Poirot, he said. Reginald shot himself plain as day. I was in my cabin with Evelyn from 10 onward. We heard nothing. And your wife's sleeping draught, Poirot said. It is a regular habit? Grayson nodded. She's delicate, always has been. Takes it most nights. Mrs. Evelyn Grayson, when called, confirmed her husband's account in a whisper, her eyes never leaving the floor. I slept through everything, she said. I didn't hear a shot. Mr. Julian Merriweather was last.
Lipstick, Poirot, must belong to someone else. As he left, Poirot turned to Hastings. The cigarette, the earring, the note. These are threads, mon ami. But there is another clue, one we have overlooked. The silence of the shot. It is not possible unless the revolver was muffled or the shot was fired elsewhere. Hastings frowned. Elsewhere? But the body was in the cabin. Précisément, Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. We must consider all possibilities. Now, let us examine the crew's quarters and the deck once more. The truth, it hides in the places we have not yet looked. As they stepped onto the deck, the sea stretched endlessly before them, a mirror of secrets. Poirot's mind was at work, piecing together the puzzle. But Hastings knew the real test lay ahead. The murderer was among them, and the Sapphire yacht was a stage where every word, every glance could be a clue or a lie. Chapter 5. The Red Herrings. The Sapphire yacht lay anchored under a sky now tinged with the first hints of afternoon clouds, their shadows dappling the deck where Hercule Poirot stood, his small frame a stark contrast to the vastness of the sea. The air carried a faint chill, as though the vessel itself sensed the darkening mood within its polished confines. Captain Arthur Hastings followed Poirot, his notepad clutched tightly, his mind wrestling with the tangle of alibis and clues that seemed to lead nowhere.
The detective's calm assurance was a beacon, but Hastings could not shake the feeling that the truth was slipping further away, hidden behind a veil of carefully crafted lies. Poirot had declared his intention to re-examine the deck and the crew's quarters, but first he paused by the railing where the lipstick-stained cigarette butt had been found. He held it up, studying it in the sunlight, his eyes narrowing as he noted the faint red smear. "This, Hastings," he said, "is a red herring, perhaps, but a deliberate one. Someone wishes us to believe a woman was here, yet no woman admits to it. We must tread carefully, for the obvious is often the most misleading." Hastings frowned. "You think it was planted?" Poirot's moustache twitched. "I think everything, mon ami, until the facts prove otherwise. Come, let us see what else the deck reveals." Their search yielded little at first. The deck was immaculate, the crew diligent in their maintenance. But near the stern, tucked behind a coil of rope, Poirot spotted a small, crumpled piece of fabric, a silk handkerchief monogrammed with the initials VG. Hastings' eyes widened. Victor Grayson's. He said he was in his cabin all night. "Indeed," Poirot said, slipping the handkerchief into a handkerchief of his own. "Yet here it is, far from his cabin. Another thread in our tapestry." Small galley served the crew's needs. Miss Ellen Tate, the stewardess, was there, polishing silverware with a nervous energy. She started at their arrival, her hands trembling slightly. "Mademoiselle Tate," Poirot said, his voice gentle but probing.
"You were in the galley this morning, preparing breakfast, oui? Did you see anyone on deck or in the corridors before the scream?"
Ellen shook her head, her eyes wide.
"No, sir. I was below deck from 5 o'clock onward. I didn't see anyone until Lady Beatrice screamed."
Poirot nodded, his gaze lingering on her.
"And last night, after dinner, you served the guests, did you not? Did you notice anything unusual?"
She hesitated, her fingers tightening on the cloth.
"Everyone seemed tense, sir. Sir Reginald was quieter than usual. And Lady Beatrice, she barely spoke to him. Mr. Grayson was loud, as always, but his wife looked ill. Miss Pembroke and Mr. Merriweather were laughing, but it felt forced. I don't know, sir. It's hard to explain."
Poirot's eyes softened.
"You observe well, mademoiselle. One last question. Did you see anyone near the master cabin after Sir Reginald retired?"
Ellen's cheeks flushed.
"No, sir. I was clearing the saloon until 11, then went to my bunk."
As they left the crew's quarters, Poirot murmured to Hastings.
"The young stewardess. She sees more than she says. Her nervousness, it is not merely shock. We must keep watch."
Back in the library, Poirot turned his attention to the clues they had gathered. The pearl earring, the threatening note, the lipstick-stained cigarette butt, and now the monogrammed handkerchief. Each seemed to point to a different suspect, yet Poirot's expression suggested he was wary of their apparent clarity.
"These are red herrings, Hastings," he said, "designed to mislead. The earring implicates Lady Beatrice, the handkerchief Mr. Grayson, the cigarette perhaps Miss Pembroke or Mrs. Grayson. But the truth, it lies deeper."
Hastings frowned. "You think someone planted these clues?"
"Précisément,"
Poirot said.
"A clever murderer does not leave such obvious traces unless they wish to divert attention. We must look beyond the surface."
Their next move was to confront Victor Grayson about the handkerchief. The stockbroker was in the saloon, nursing a whiskey despite the early hour. When Poirot presented the handkerchief, Grayson's face reddened. "That's mine, yes, but I didn't drop it on deck. I was in my cabin all night, as I told you. Someone must have taken it." Poirot raised an eyebrow.
"Taken it, monsieur? From your cabin?"
Grayson blustered. "Well, I don't know how it got there.
I keep my things in my jacket pocket. Maybe it fell out during dinner.
Planning a merger, but it was all above board. As Grayson stormed off, Poirot turned to Hastings.
He is defensive, no? The handkerchief, it is too convenient. We must learn more about this merger.
The afternoon brought a visit from Captain Mortimer, who provided a detailed map of the yacht, marking the cabins and key areas. Poirot studied it intently, noting the proximity of the master cabin to the deck and the crew's quarters.
The layout, Hastings, it is critical. The murderer needed access, opportunity, and a means to escape unnoticed.
As they reviewed the map, a commotion erupted in the saloon. Miss Clara Pembroke, her face flushed with anger, was confronting Mr. Julian Merriweather.
You had no right to say that, she cried, her voice carrying. It's a lie, and you know it.
Merriweather's smile was cool.
My dear Clara, I only said what everyone's thinking. Your father's debts, Sir Reginald's generosity, it's no secret you were close to him.
Clara's hand flew to her mouth, and she fed the room, tears streaming. Poirot watched the exchange with keen interest, then approached Merriweather.
Monsieur, your words upset Mademoiselle Pembroke. What is this about debts?
Merriweather shrugged, his eyes glinting. Her father's textile business is failing. Sir Reginald bailed him out last year, but there were rumours. Clara was grateful. More than she should have been, perhaps. Poirot's expression remained neutral.
And you, monsieur? What was your connection to Sir Reginald?
Merriweather's smile faded. He invested in one of my plays. A flop, sadly. But we parted on good terms. As Poirot dismissed him, Hastings whispered, "That was cruel, what he said about Clara. Do you think there's truth to it?" Poirot's eyes gleamed.
Truth, Hastings, is often cloaked in cruelty.
But Merriweather, he enjoys stirring the pot, no?
He too is a red herring, pointing fingers to distract from his own secrets.
As the day waned, Poirot gathered the guests for a brief announcement.
Mesdames et messieurs, he said, the police will arrive soon, but until then, I ask you to remain vigilant. Do not leave the yacht and report anything unusual to me. The truth, it will not hide forever.
The guests dispersed, their faces a mix of fear and suspicion. Hastings felt a chill as he watched them go, each a potential murderer cloaked in civility. Poirot, however, seemed invigorated, his mind weaving the clues into a pattern only he could see.
The red herrings, Hastings, he said. They are many, but they cannot obscure the truth. We must look to the heart of the matter, Sir Reginald's announcement. That, I believe, is where the motive lies.
As the sun dipped below the horizon, the Sapphire yacht grew quiet, but the silence was deceptive. Somewhere among the polished decks and whispered alibis, a clue in detail. The Sapphire yacht seemed to shrink under the weight of its secrets as the afternoon deepened, the sea beyond its polished railings a mirror of deceptive calm. The clouds that had gathered earlier now thickened, casting a muted light over the deck where Hercule Poirot stood, his sharp eyes scanning the horizon, as though it might yield answers. Captain Arthur Hastings, ever at his side, felt the tension aboard the yacht like a tightening noose, each guest's glance and gesture laden with unspoken meaning. Poirot's methodical approach was a lifeline, but Hastings could not shake the sense that the clues they had uncovered, the pearl earring, the threatening note, the lipstick-stained cigarette, the monogrammed handkerchief, were pieces of a puzzle deliberately scattered to mislead. Poirot had returned to the master cabin, insisting that the scene of Sir Reginald Ashbourne's death held more secrets than it had yet revealed. The room was as they had left it, the air heavy with the faint scent of brandy and the lingering presence of violence. The body, still covered, awaited the police, who were delayed by a squall off the coast of Senlis. Poirot moved with his usual precision, his gloved hands tracing the edges of the desk, the armchair, the porthole. He paused by the bedside table,
where the untouched glass of brandy stood, its amber surface undisturbed. "Regardez, Hastings," Poirot said, his voice low but vibrant with discovery. "This glass, it is a clue in itself. Why pour brandy and not drink? Sir Reginald, he was not a man to waste such a fine vintage, no? And observe." He tilted the glass slightly, revealing a faint smudge on its rim, barely visible in the dim light. A fingerprint, perhaps, but not in the usual place for drinking. It is as though someone touched the glass after it was poured. Hastings leaned closer, his brow furrowing. "You think someone else poured it, to make it look like Sir Reginald was drinking before he died?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Précisément. The scene, it is staged, but not perfectly. The little details, they betray the hand of the murderer." He turned his attention to the revolver, still clutched in Sir Reginald's lifeless hand. Poirot examined it carefully, noting the angle of the fingers, the position of the trigger. "The grip, it is too perfect," he murmured. "A man in despair, he does not hold a weapon so neatly. And the wound?" He gestured to the covered body. "Dr. Crane noted its unusual angle. We must consider how the shot was fired, and where." Hastings frowned. "Where? But he was shot in this cabin, wasn't he?" Poirot raised a finger. "We assume, Hastings, but assumptions are dangerous. The silence of the shot, Here." Hastings' eyes widened. "You mean he was killed somewhere else and brought to the cabin? But how? The door was locked and the portholes too small." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Patience, mon ami. Let us explore another detail." He moved to the desk where the scattered papers still lay. Among them, he found a small, leather-bound notebook, its pages filled with Sir Reginald's meticulous handwriting. Most entries were business notes, figures, contracts, names, but one page dated the previous day caught Poirot's attention. It read, "Noon, tomorrow. The truth must be told. L.B. will not forgive." "L.B.," Hastings said, peering over Poirot's shoulder. "Lady Beatrice?" "Perhaps," Poirot said, closing the notebook. "Or perhaps another. We must not leap to conclusions, but this entry, it confirms that Sir Reginald's announcement was significant. It was a threat to someone, perhaps the motive for his death." Their investigation was interrupted by a knock at the door. Captain Mortimer entered, his weathered face grim. "Monsieur Poirot, the police launch is delayed until evening. The squall's worsened. We're to keep the body secure and the guests confined." Poirot nodded. "Merci, Captain. And one question. The yacht's log. Does it record any unusual activity last night? A boat approaching, perhaps?" Mortimer shook his head. "Nothing, sir. The log shows we were anchored all night. No visitors, no disturbances. The crew was on watch, but they saw nothing." As Mortimer left, Poirot turned to Hastings. "The isolation of the yacht. It is both a challenge and an advantage. No one could leave, but no one could enter. The murderer is here, among us." Their next move was to speak with Miss Ellen Tate, the stewardess, whose nervous demeanour had piqued Poirot's interest. They found her in the galley, arranging trays for a subdued luncheon. She started at their approach, her hands fumbling with a teacup. "Mademoiselle Tate," Poirot said, his tone gentle, "you are observant, no? You see the guests, their habits, their moods. Tell me, did Sir Reginald seem troubled last night?" Ellen hesitated, her eyes darting to the door. "He was quieter than usual, sir. He drank less than the others, and he kept looking at his watch, as if waiting for something. Lady Beatrice, she barely spoke to him. It was
uncomfortable. And the others? Poirot pressed. Did you notice anything unusual? She bit her lip. Mr. Merriweather. He was whispering with Miss Pembroke after dinner, on the deck. I saw them when I was clearing the saloon. And Mrs. Grayson, she looked ill, kept clutching her handkerchief. I offered—
Handkerchief found on deck? It was silk, not lace, and bore Victor Grayson's initials. Another discrepancy. As they left the galley, Poirot murmured, "The stewardess. She is a window into the truth, but she fears to speak fully. We must gain her trust." Back in the library, Poirot laid out the clues on the table. The earring, the cigarette butt, the threatening note, the monogrammed handkerchief, and now the notebook entry. "Each points to a suspect," he said, "but together they form a pattern. The murderer wishes us to chase these clues, to suspect the obvious, but the little grey cells, they see beyond." Hastings frowned. "What about the brandy glass? That smudge, could it be tested for fingerprints?" Poirot nodded. "When the police arrive, yes, but for now, we rely on observation. The smudge, the notebook, the silence of the shot, these are the details that matter. And this announcement Sir Reginald planned, it is the heart of the matter." As the afternoon waned, Poirot requested a meeting with Dr. Leonard Crane, whose clinical detachment had intrigued him. The physician entered the library, his sharp features composed but wary. "Doctor," Poirot said, "you examined the body. Tell me, was there anything else you noticed beyond the wound?" Crane hesitated, then spoke. There was a faint bruise on Sir Reginald's left wrist, as though he had been gripped tightly. It was fresh, likely from the night before or that morning. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A bruise, you say? This is most interesting. And you did not mention it earlier because—" Crane adjusted his glasses. "I thought it irrelevant. A man of his age might bruise easily." Poirot dismissed him with a nod, then turned to Hastings. "A bruise, a smudge, a note. These are not red herrings, Hastings. They are the truth, hidden in plain sight. We must now consider the timeline. If the shot was fired between 5:47 and 6:47, as Dr. Crane suggests, where was each suspect? And how did the murderer escape a locked cabin?" The yacht rocked gently as the squall approached, the first drops of rain pattering on the deck. Poirot's mind was a storm of its own, piecing together the fragments of a crime that was anything but simple. Hastings felt the weight of the mystery pressing down, but with Poirot at the helm, the truth could not remain hidden for long. Chapter 7. More lies surface. The Sapphire yacht trembled under the gathering squall, its polished decks slick with the first tentative drops of rain, as the afternoon gave way to a brooding dusk. The air was heavy with the scent of salt and storm, mirroring the mounting tension among the guests, who moved through the vessel like actors in a play where the script had gone terribly awry. Hercule Poirot, undeterred with scribbled observations, his mind grappling with the clues that seemed to multiply with each passing hour. Poirot sat at the small table, the clues laid out before him like pieces of a chessboard. The pearl earring, the threatening note, the lipstick-stained cigarette butt, the monogrammed handkerchief, the smudged brandy glass, and the notebook entry with its cryptic reference to L.B. and an unforgiving truth. Each was a thread in the tapestry of the crime, but Poirot's keen eyes suggested he was beginning to see the pattern beneath the surface. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice a calm counterpoint to the distant rumble of thunder. "The lies, they are like the waves outside, constant, shifting, but not without purpose. We have heard alibis, yet they crumble under scrutiny. Now we must probe deeper into the secrets these people guard so fiercely." Hastings nodded, though his head swam with questions. "That bruise Dr. Crane mentioned, could it mean a struggle?"
And the note about L.B., if it's Lady Beatrice, what truth was Sir Reginald going to reveal? Poirot's moustache twitched. Questions, Hastings, are the beginning of answers. Let us seek those answers in the hearts of our suspects. Their first interview of the evening was with Mr. Julian Merryweather, the playwright whose sharp wit and penchant for gossip made him both charming and dangerous. He entered the library with his usual air of nonchalance, though his dark eyes betrayed a flicker of unease as he took the chair opposite Poirot. "Monsieur Merryweather," Poirot began, his tone deceptively mild, "you are a man of observation, a writer of human nature. Tell me, what did you observe last night, beyond your cigarette on the deck?" Merryweather's smile was thin. "I told you, Poirot, I was stargazing until 1. The others were in their cabins, or so I thought. I saw nothing out of the ordinary." Poirot leaned forward, his eyes piercing. "And yet, you spoke of Miss Pembroke's connection to Sir Reginald, her father's debts, her gratitude. How did you come by this knowledge?" Merryweather shrugged, though his fingers tapped nervously on the armrest. "London gossip, Poirot. Sir Reginald was no saint. His generosity often came with strings. Clara's father owed him a fortune, and there were whispers she was overly attentive." Poirot's gaze did not waver. "And you, monsieur, your play, the one Sir Reginald funded, it failed, oui? Did this cause bitterness?" Merryweather's smile faltered. "It was a business venture, nothing more. We parted amicably. I had no reason to wish him harm." As he left, Poirot murmured to Hastings, "The playwright, he deflects with charm, but his words about Miss Pembroke, they are a weapon." A voice barely above a whisper.
"Monsieur Poirot, what Julian said, it's not true. I wasn't involved with Sir Reginald. He helped my father, yes, but it was a loan, nothing more." Poirot's tone was gentle. "Mademoiselle, I do not judge. But tell me, this loan, did it come with conditions?" Clara hesitated, her eyes darting to the floor. "Sir Reginald, he suggested I might marry his nephew, a way to secure the debt. I refused. I told him I loved someone else." Poirot's eyebrows rose. "And who is this someone, mademoiselle?" She flushed, her voice trembling. I'd rather not say. It's private." Poirot nodded, dismissing her gently. As she left, he turned to Hastings. "The young lady, she hides a secret of the heart. This lover, she protects him, but why? We must learn his identity." Their next interview was with Mr. Victor Grayson, whose booming voice and restless energy filled the library. When confronted about the monogrammed handkerchief, he grew defensive, his face reddening. "I told you, Poirot, it must have been taken. I was in my cabin with Evelyn. Ask her." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And your business with Sir Reginald, the merger, was it entirely amicable?" Grayson's jaw tightened. "There were disagreements, yes. He wanted to sell his shares to a rival firm. I thought it foolish, but we were negotiating. No cause for murder, if that's what you're implying." As Grayson stormed out, Poirot turned to Hastings. "The stockbroker, he is quick to anger. His handkerchief, his business disputes, these are not mere coincidences." Mrs. Evelyn Grayson was next, her frail form almost lost in the chair. Her voice was a whisper, her eyes fixed on her lap. I was asleep, Monsieur Poirot. The sleeping draught. I take it every night. I heard nothing. Poirot leaned forward. Madame, your handkerchief? The lace one with the embroidered rose? Did you lose it last night? Her eyes widened and she shook her head. No, it's in my cabin. I had it at dinner, but I don't remember losing it. Poirot dismissed her, his expression thoughtful. Another handkerchief, Hastings, but not the one we found. The lace, the rose, it is distinct from Mr. Grayson's silk. Yet another lie surfaces.
Crane left. Poirot turned to Hastings.
The doctor, he omits details, yet they are critical. A bruise, a scratch, these suggest a struggle, perhaps a confrontation before the shot was fired. The rain began to fall in earnest, drumming against the porthole as Poirot arranged the clues on the table. The lies, Hastings, they pile upon each other. The handkerchiefs, the debts, the secrets of the heart, each guest hides something. But the notebook entry, the bruise, the scratch, these are the truths we must follow. Hastings frowned. What about Lady Beatrice? The LB in the notebook, could it be someone else? Poirot nodded. It is possible, but we must also consider the timing. If Sir Reginald was killed between 5:47 and 6:47, as Dr. Crane suggests, someone was in that cabin. The locked door, the silent shot, these are the riddles we must solve. As the storm grew louder, Poirot rose, his small frame radiating determination. Come, Hastings, we must examine the deck once more. The rain, it may wash away evidence, but the truth it endures. The Sapphire yacht rocked beneath the squall, its secrets buried in the lies of its passengers. But Poirot's little grey cells were at work, and Hastings knew that no lie, however clever, could withstand their relentless scrutiny. The Sapphire yacht groaned under the weight of the storm, its polished timbers creaking as the squall battered the vessel, sending waves crashing against the hull. The rain fell in relentless sheets, blurring the line between sea and sky, and the once elegant saloon was now a dim, claustrophobic space where the guests gathered, their faces pale and strained. The air was thick with suspicion, each glance a silent accusation, each silence a confession unspoken. Hercule Poirot, undeterred by the tempest outside or the tension within, stood at the centre of the room, his small frame commanding attention as he prepared to probe deeper into the mystery of Sir Reginald Ashbourne's death. Captain Arthur Hastings stood near the bar, his heart heavy with the weight of the clues they had uncovered. The pearl earring, the threatening note, the lipstick-stained cigarette butt, the monogrammed handkerchief, the smudged brandy glass, the cryptic notebook entry, and now the bruise and scratch on Sir Reginald's body. Each pointed to a different suspect, yet Poirot's calm assurance suggested he was beginning to see the truth beneath the tangled lies. Hastings, however, felt the strain of the investigation, his mind struggling to keep pace with Poirot's relentless logic. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began, his voice cutting through the murmur of the storm. We are gathered here not for pleasantries but for truth. Sir Reginald Ashbourne was murdered and the murderer is among us. I ask you now to consider your actions, your secrets, for they cannot remain hidden. The little grey cells, they see all. The guests
shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting to one another. Lady Beatrice Ashbourne sat rigidly, her hands clasped around her pearl necklace, her face a mask of controlled grief. Dr. Leonard Crane stood near the window, his sharp features taut, while Miss Clara Pembroke clutched her handkerchief, her eyes red from earlier tears. Mr. Victor Grayson paced, his gold watch clicking incessantly, his wife, Evelyn, shrinking in his shadow. Mr. Julian Merriweather leant against the bar, his usual smirk replaced by a thoughtful frown, and Miss Ellen Tate, the stewardess, hovered near the door, her youthful face pale but alert. Poirot's gaze settled on Lady Beatrice. "Madame," he said, his tone gentle but unyielding. "Your husband planned an announcement, one that caused him great concern. You spoke of a private matter you wished to discuss with him this morning. What was it?" Lady Beatrice's lips trembled, and for a moment it seemed she might refuse to answer. Then her voice broke, a raw edge cutting through her composure. "It was about our marriage," she said, her eyes glistening. "Reginald, he had learned something he believed would ruin us. He wouldn't tell me what, only that he had to act. I begged him to reconsider, but he was resolute. I went to his cabin to plead with him, to stop whatever he planned, but he was already dead." A murmur rippled through the room, and Hastings saw Miss Pembroke's hand tighten on her handkerchief. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And this secret, madame, did it concern another here?" Lady Beatrice shook her head, but her hesitation was palpable. "I don't know. He wouldn't say." Poirot nodded, turning to Miss Pembroke. "Mademoiselle Clara, you too have a secret. You spoke of a lover, someone you protect. I ask you now, who is he?" Clara's face crumpled, and she buried her face in her hands, a sob escaping her. It's Julian," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Julian Merryweather. We've been meeting in secret for months. My father would never approve, and Sir Reginald, he knew. He threatened to tell my father unless I agreed to marry his nephew." Merryweather's head snapped up, his eyes blazing. "Clara, you didn't need to." He stopped, his jaw tightening, as all eyes turned to him. Poirot's voice was calm but incisive. "Monsieur Merryweather, you did not mention this connection. Why?" Merryweather's hands clenched. "Because it's private, Poirot, and because I knew how it would look. Yes, Sir Reginald disapproved of me. He thought I was after Clara's fortune, but I love her. I'd never harm him, though." The room fell silent, save for the drumming of the rain. Poirot turned to Mr. Grayson, whose face was red with indignation. "And you, Monsieur Grayson?"
"Told you, we had disagreements, but nothing worth killing over. The merger would have made us both richer if he'd listened to me." Mrs. Grayson, silent until now, suddenly spoke, her voice a fragile thread. "Victor, stop. Tell them the truth." Her eyes were wide, her hands trembling as she clutched her lace handkerchief. "You were furious with Reginald. You said he'd betrayed you, that he'd ruin everything. I heard you in our cabin after dinner." Grayson whirled on her, his face contorted. "Evelyn, be quiet. You don't know what you're saying." But Evelyn pressed on, her voice gaining strength. "You left the cabin that night, Victor. I woke at 3 and you were gone. I thought you'd gone for a walk, but you didn't come back until nearly dawn." The room erupted in gasps, and Grayson's face drained of colour. "That's nonsense," he roared. "I was in the cabin all night. You were asleep, Evelyn. You took your draught." Poirot raised a hand, silencing the outburst. "Madame Grayson, this is most significant. You are certain of the time?" Evelyn nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I checked my watch. It was 10 minutes past 3. I couldn't sleep after that. Not until he returned." Grayson sank into a chair, his bluster gone. Poirot's eyes gleamed as he turned to Dr. Crane. "Doctor, you have been silent. Yet you, too, have a connection to Sir Reginald, no? His investments in your medical practice, were they without complication?" Crane's lips tightened, his voice cold. "He funded my research, yes, but we had no quarrel. His death benefits no one, least of all me." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "And you, Mademoiselle Tate?" he said, turning to the stewardess. "You have seen much, heard much. Is there anything you wish to add?" Ellen Tate's face paled, but she shook her head. "No, sir. I've told you all I know." As the guests dispersed, their emotions raw and exposed, Poirot drew Hastings aside. "Mon ami, we have reached a turning point. The lies, they crack under pressure. Mrs. Grayson's revelation, Miss Pembroke's confession, these are not mere details. They are the heart of the matter."
Hastings frowned. But Grayson's absence, it makes him look guilty. And Clara and Merryweather, they had motive too if Sir Reginald was threatening their relationship. Poirot's eyes twinkled. Oui, but motive alone is not enough. The bruise, the scratch, the silent shot, these tell a story of method, not just motive. We must return to the cabin. There is one detail we have overlooked. They braved the rain to reach the master cabin, where the storm's dim light cast eerie shadows. Poirot knelt by the armchair, his gloved fingers tracing the floor. "Here, Hastings," he said, pointing to a faint mark in the carpet, a small, circular indentation, barely noticeable. "This is not from furniture. It is from something heavy, placed briefly and removed."
Hastings squinted. A tripod, a stand. Poirot nodded. Perhaps. Or something else, a tool, a device. The murderer they planned carefully, but no plan is perfect. As the storm raged on, Poirot's mind was a beacon in the darkness, piecing together the fragments of truth. Hastings felt the weight of the moment, the raw emotions of the guests laying bare their secrets. The Sapphire yacht was no longer a place of luxury, but a crucible where lies burned away, revealing the truth beneath. Chapter 9. The Trap. The storm that battered the Sapphire yacht had reached its peak, the wind howling like a chorus of restless spirits, the rain lashing the decks in relentless sheets. Inside, the saloon was a haven of uneasy quiet, the flickering light of the chandeliers casting long shadows across the faces of the guests, who sat in a tense semicircle, their eyes fixed on Hercule Poirot. The little Belgian detective stood at the head of the room, his posture impeccable, his moustache a perfect curve, his green eyes alight with the quiet intensity of a man closing in on the truth. Captain Arthur Hastings stood by his side, his heart pounding, sensing that this moment was the pivot on which the entire mystery would turn. The clues had mounted like pieces of a shattered mosaic: the pearl earring, the threatening note, the lipstick-stained cigarette butt, the monogrammed handkerchief, the smudged brandy glass, the notebook entry, the bruise and scratch on Sir Reginald Ashbourne's body, and now the mysterious indentation in the carpet. Each pointed to a suspect, yet Poirot's methodical mind saw beyond the obvious, weaving the fragments into a pattern that promised to ensnare the guilty. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice clear and resonant despite the storm's din. "We stand at the heart of a crime most cunning. Sir Reginald Ashbourne was murdered, not by his own hand, but by one among us. Tonight I set a trap, not with force, but with the power of the little grey cells. I ask you to listen, to reflect, for the truth will not remain hidden." The guests shifted uneasily. Lady Beatrice Ashbourne's face was a mask of controlled grief, her fingers tightening on her pearl necklace. Dr. Leonard Crane stood rigidly, his sharp eyes narrowed. Miss Clara Pembroke clutched her handkerchief, her confession about her secret love for Julian Merryweather still hanging in the air. Mr. Victor Grayson's face was flushed, his wife Evelyn trembling beside him, her revelation about his absence from their cabin a fresh wound. Mr. Merryweather leaned against the bar, his usual smirk replaced by a wary alertness. Miss Ellen Tate, the stewardess, hovered near the door, her youthful face pale but watchful. Poirot held up the threatening note, its smudged signature glinted.
Desk, crumpled as though in anger. To whom was it addressed? And who wrote it? Let us consider. He turned to Lady Beatrice. "Madame, your husband planned an announcement that you feared would ruin you. Was this note meant for him?" Lady Beatrice's lips parted, but she shook her head. I don't know. He never showed me such a note. If it was for him, I didn't write it." Poirot nodded, his gaze shifting to Mr. Grayson. "Monsieur Grayson, your business with Sir Reginald was troubled. You were absent from your cabin at 3 a.m., as your wife revealed. Did you confront Sir Reginald? Did you write this note?" Grayson's face reddened, his voice a growl. "I told you. I was in my cabin. Evelyn was mistaken. She was half asleep. I had no quarrel with Reginald worth killing over." Evelyn's eyes widened, but she said nothing, her hands twisting her lace handkerchief. Poirot's eyes flickered to her, then moved on to Miss Pembroke. "Mademoiselle Clara, your secret love for Monsieur Merryweather was threatened by Sir Reginald. Did you write this note to warn him?" Clara's voice trembled.
"No, Monsieur Poirot. I begged him not to tell my father, but I didn't write any note. I swear it."
Merryweather stepped forward, his voice sharp. "Leave her alone, Poirot. If anyone had reason to threaten Reginald, it was me, not Clara. But I didn't write that, and I didn't kill him." Poirot's smile was faint. "Merci, monsieur. Your candor is noted. But let us turn to another clue, the indentation in the carpet near Sir Reginald's chair. A small circular mark, not from furniture, but from something placed briefly and removed. What could it be?" He paused, letting the question hang in the air. The guests exchanged glances, their silence heavy with suspicion. Poirot continued, "And the bruise on Sir Reginald's wrist, the scratch on his neck, these suggest a struggle, yet the cabin was locked, the shot unheard. How is this possible?" Dr. Crane cleared his throat, his voice cold. "You're suggesting the body was moved, Monsieur Poirot? That's preposterous. The blood, the position, it all points to death in that chair." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Does it, Doctor? Or does it point to a clever staging? The smudged brandy glass, untouched, suggests someone arranged the scene. And the silence of the shot?" He turned to Captain Mortimer, who stood near the door. "Captain, the yacht's lifeboats, were they checked this morning?" Mortimer frowned. "Yes, sir. All accounted for, no signs of use." Poirot nodded. "Bon. But let us consider another possibility. The porthole in the master cabin. Its seal is worn elsewhere, perhaps on deck, where the storm's noise masked the shot. The body was moved to the cabin, the revolver placed in his hand. The door locked from the inside, but the murderer made mistakes. The indentation, the bruise, the scratch. And now, I ask, who among you was on deck last night?" The guests froze, their eyes darting. Merryweather raised his hand slowly. "I was, as I said, until 1, but I saw no one." Poirot's gaze turned to Miss Tate. "Mademoiselle, you were in the galley from 5 a.m. Did you see anyone near the deck or the master cabin?" Ellen's face paled, and she hesitated, her voice trembling. I saw someone, sir, but I didn't want to say. It was just a shadow. Near the stern, around 5:30. I couldn't see who it was." The room erupted in murmurs, and Grayson slammed his fist on the table. "This is absurd. You're accusing us all, Poirot, with no proof." Poirot raised a hand, his voice calm but commanding. "I accuse no one, yet, but I ask you to consider. The murderer is here, listening, watching. The trap is set. If you have something to confess, do so now, before the truth ensnares you." The silence that followed was suffocating, broken only by the storm's roar. Lady Beatrice's eyes glistened with tears. Clara clutched Merryweather's hand, and Grayson glared at his wife, who shrank back. Dr. Crane's face was unreadable, and Ellen Tate looked as though she might faint. As the guests dispersed, Poirot drew Hastings aside. "Mon ami, the trap is not in words alone, it is in their reactions. Did you see? The stewardess, she knows more than she admits. And Mrs. Grayson, she fears her husband. The truth is close, Hastings, but we must be patient." They returned to the master cabin, where Poirot examined the porthole once more. "This," he said, pointing to the worn seal, is the key. A weapon, a hand, something passed through here, and the indentation suggests a tool, perhaps to muffle the shot. Hastings frowned. But how do we prove it? Poirot's eyes twinkled. By watching, Hastings. The murderer will betray themselves. The trap is set, and they cannot resist stepping into it. As the storm raged on, the Sapphire yacht became a crucible of fear and suspicion. Poirot's words had stirred the pot, and Hastings knew that the next revelation would bring them closer to the truth, or to danger. Chapter 10. The Reveal. The storm had abated, leaving the Sapphire yacht cloaked in an eerie calm as the evening descended, the sea a glassy mirror under a sky bruised with fading clouds. The saloon, once a stage for polite conversation and clinking champagne flutes, was now a courtroom of sorts, its opulent decor overshadowed by the weight of
The moment of unmasking had arrived. The guests, gathered in a tense semicircle, wore expressions of dread, defiance, and desperate hope, each aware that Poirot's little gray cells had woven the scattered clues into a tapestry of truth. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice steady and resonant. "We have journeyed through a labyrinth of lies, but now the path is clear. Sir Reginald Ashbourne was murdered, and the murderer stands among us. Tonight I shall reveal how, why, and by whose hand this crime was committed. Attend closely, for the truth is both simple and profound." The guests leaned forward, their breaths held. Lady Beatrice Ashbourne's face was pale, her hands gripping her pearl necklace. Dr. Leonard Crane stood rigidly, his sharp features taut. Miss Clara Pembroke clung to Julian Merryweather's arm, her eyes wide with fear. Mr. Victor Grayson's face was flushed, his wife Evelyn trembling beside him. Merryweather's usual smirk was gone, replaced by a wary intensity. Miss Ellen Tate, the stewardess, stood near the door, her youthful face a mask of anxiety. Poirot held up the threatening note, its smudged signature a silent accusation. "Let us begin with the crime," he said. Sir Reginald was found in his cabin, a revolver in his hand, a bullet in his temple. The scene suggested suicide, but the little gray cells, they saw otherwise. The bruise on his wrist, the scratch on his neck, the untouched brandy glass with its smudged rim, these were not the marks of a man taking his own life. They spoke of a struggle, a staging, a murder most cunning. He paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back. The shot was not heard, despite the revolver's power. The cabin was locked, yet the porthole's seal was worn, suggesting a possibility. The indentation in the carpet, a small, circular mark, hinted at a tool or device. And the notebook entry, "Noon tomorrow. The truth must be told. L.B. will not forgive," pointed to a motive. But whose? Poirot turned to Lady Beatrice. "Madame, you feared your husband's announcement. You said it concerned your marriage, a secret that could ruin you. Was it infidelity, perhaps? Or something deeper?" Lady Beatrice's voice trembled. "I told you, Monsieur Poirot, I didn't know the details. He was secretive, distant. I only knew he was determined to reveal something." Poirot nodded, his gaze shifting to Mr. Grayson. "Monsieur Grayson, your handkerchief was found on deck, yet you claimed to be in your cabin. Your wife revealed you were absent from 3 a.m. until nearly dawn. Admirable. But there is more you have not said, oui?" Evelyn's eyes filled with tears, but she remained silent. Poirot moved on to Clara and Merryweather. "Mademoiselle Pembroke, Monsieur Merryweather, your secret love was threatened by Sir Reginald's plan to marry Clara to his nephew.
Did you act to protect your future? Clara shook her head, tears streaming.
No, we didn't. We loved each other, but we wouldn't kill.
Merriweather's jaw tightened. She's telling the truth, Poirot. I despised Reginald for his threats, but I didn't shoot him. Poirot nodded, then turned to Dr. Crane. Doctor, your investments from Sir Reginald came with strings, no? And the bruise, the scratch, you noticed but did not fully disclose. Why? Crane's voice was cold. I told you. The marks were minor. I had no reason to harm him. His funding was vital to my work. Finally, Poirot's gaze settled on Ellen Tate. Mademoiselle Tate, you saw a shadow near the stern at 5:30. You have been nervous, observant, yet silent. What do you know? Ellen's face paled, and she stammered. I told you all I saw, sir. Poirot raised a hand, silencing the room. Enough. Let us reconstruct the crime. Sir Reginald was killed not in his cabin, but on deck, where the storm's noise masked the shot. The murderer used a device, a silencer perhaps, attached to the revolver, to muffle the sound. The body was carried to the cabin, the revolver placed in his hand, the door locked with a key. The porthole was used to pass the silencer out to be discarded in the sea. The indentation in the carpet was from this device, set down briefly during the staging. A gasp rippled through the room. Poirot continued, the bruise and scratch suggest a struggle, so Reginald was surprised, perhaps restrained. The threatening note was not for him, but from him, written to his killer, who crumpled it in anger. The L.B. was not Lady Beatrice, but Leonard Crane. L for Leonard, B for his middle name, Bernard. Crane's face drained of color. That's absurd, Poirot. I had no motive. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Oh, but you did, Doctor. Sir Reginald funded your research, but he discovered your secret. You were falsifying results, using his money for personal gain. His announcement would expose you, ruin your career. You confronted him on deck, argued, struggled. You shot him using a silencer you had prepared, knowing the storm would cover the noise. You carried him to the cabin, staged the suicide, and discarded the silencer through the porthole. But you made mistakes, the bruise, the scratch, the smudge on the glass where you adjusted it. Crane's hands trembled, but he shook.
The shadow at 5:30, disposing of the evidence. Ellen burst into tears. I'm sorry, sir. I was afraid to say it was Dr. Crane, near the stern, throwing something into the sea.
Crane staggered back, his face ashen. No, you're wrong. Poirot's voice was relentless. You planted the handkerchief to implicate Grayson, the cigarette to suggest a woman's presence. But the truth, it cannot be hidden. You killed Sir Reginald to protect your secret. The room was silent, save for Crane's ragged breathing. He sank into a chair, his head in his hands. He was going to ruin me, he whispered. I had no choice. Poirot turned to the others. The trap was set, and the truth has emerged. The police will confirm the details, but the case is closed. As the guests dispersed, stunned and shaken, Hastings stared at Poirot in awe. How did you know, Poirot? The silencer, the note, it all fit so perfectly. Poirot smiled faintly. The little grey cells, mon ami. They see what others miss. The Sapphire yacht lay quiet. The storm passed, but the echoes of truth lingered, a testament to Poirot's genius. Chapter 11. The Reflection. The Sapphire yacht lay still, under a sky now cleared of storm clouds, the stars emerging like silent witnesses to the drama that had unfolded within its opulent confines. The sea was calm, its gentle ripples reflecting the moonlight, a stark contrast to the turmoil that had gripped the vessel only hours before. The saloon, where Hercule Poirot had unveiled the truth of Sir Reginald Ashbourne's murder, was now empty, the guests having retreated to their cabins, their minds heavy with the weight of Dr. Leonard Crane's confession. Captain Arthur Hastings sat with Poirot in the yacht's small library, the air quiet, save for the soft creak of the ship and the distant hum of the engine as the crew prepared for the police launch's imminent arrival. Poirot sat at the table, his hands folded, his green eyes thoughtful, as he gazed at the clues still arranged before him. The pearl earring, the threatening note, the lipstick-stained cigarette butt, the monogrammed handkerchief, the smudged brandy glass, the notebook entry, and the small metal fragment from the silencer. Each had played its part in unraveling the mystery, but it was Poirot's relentless logic, his little grey cells, that had pieced them together into a coherent whole. Hastings, still reeling from the dramatic reveal, looked at his friend with a mixture of awe and curiosity. "Poirot," Hastings said, breaking the silence, "how do you do it? The silencer, the note, the way you knew it was Crane, it all seemed so impossible until you laid it out. But now it's as clear as day." Poirot's moustache twitched with
They observe, they connect, they deduce. Dr. Crane's crime was clever, but no crime is perfect. There is always a flaw, a detail that betrays. Hastings leaned forward, his notepad open, though he had long since stopped writing. But the silencer, that was the key, wasn't it? Without that fragment, would you have been certain? Poirot nodded, his eyes glinting. The fragment, it confirmed what I suspected. The silence of the shot, Hastings. It was the first clue that the crime was not as it seemed. A revolver is loud, even in a storm. The worn porthole seal suggested a means to dispose of evidence, and the indentation in the carpet hinted at a device. But it was the human element, the bruise, the scratch, Miss Tate's hesitation, that pointed to Dr. Crane. Hastings frowned, recalling the tense moments in the saloon. And the note, "L.B. will not forgive." You knew it was Crane's middle name, Bernard. How? Poirot's smile widened. A small detail, mon ami, but significant. Among Sir Reginald's papers, I found a letter addressed to Dr. Leonard B. Crane. It was a hunch, confirmed by the motive, Crane's falsified research funded by Sir Reginald's wealth. The announcement would have exposed him, ruined him. He acted to protect his reputation, but in doing so, he left traces. Hastings shook his head, marveling. And the red herrings, the handkerchief, the cigarette, the earring, they nearly fooled me. Poirot chuckled softly. They were meant to, Hastings. The murderer, he is clever, planting clues to implicate others. Grayson's handkerchief, a cigarette to suggest a woman, the earring to point to Lady Beatrice. But the little grey cells, they see through such tricks. The truth lies not in the obvious, but in the subtle, the smudge on the glass, the bruise, the shadow Miss Tate saw. Hastings glanced at the porthole, where the moonlight shimmered on the sea. What about the others? Lady Beatrice, Clara, Merryweather, they all had secrets. Were they innocent? Poirot's expression grew sombre. Innocent of murder, oui, but not of secrets. Lady Beatrice feared her husband's revelation, perhaps an infidelity or a financial ruin. Miss Pembroke and Monsieur Merryweather hid their love, a motive but not a crime. Monsieur Grayson's absence from his cabin was suspicious, but it was likely a private matter, perhaps a rendezvous, perhaps a quarrel with his wife. Madame Grayson's courage in speaking was the key to breaking the case, though she suffered for it. And Miss Tate? Hastings asked. She was terrified to speak. Poirot nodded. The young stewardess, she saw more than she dared admit. Her fear was not of guilt, but of consequence. To speak against a man like Dr. Crane, death. Crane's desperation, it all feels so unnecessary. Poirot's eyes softened, his voice taking on a philosophical tone. It is the tragedy of human nature, Hastings. Greed, fear, ambition, they drive men to destroy what they seek to protect. Dr. Crane believed his reputation was worth a life, but in the end, he lost both. It is a lesson, no? But the truth, it cannot be silenced, no matter how clever the deception. The distant sound of an engine broke the silence, signaling the approach of the police launch. Poirot rose, gathering the clues into a small leather case. The authorities will take Dr. Crane, and the Sapphire yacht will return to its purpose, elegance, not tragedy. But for us, Hastings, the work is done. Hastings followed Poirot to the deck, where the police launch was docking, its lights cutting through the night. Dr. Crane, now subdued, was led away in handcuffs, his head bowed, his sharp features dulled by defeat. The other guests watched from a distance, their faces a mix of relief and exhaustion. Lady Beatrice stood alone, her eyes fixed on the sea, as though seeking answers in its depths. Clara and Merryweather held hands, their love no longer a secret. Grayson and his wife stood apart, the marriage strained but intact. Miss Tate lingered by the railing, her relief palpable. As the police took charge, Poirot turned to Hastings, his voice low. Mon ami, we have seen the darkness of the human heart, but also its resilience. Let us leave this place and let the sea wash away its secrets. They boarded the launch, the yacht receding into the night, its gleaming hull a fading memory. Hastings looked back, his heart heavy, but his faith in Poirot unshaken. The little Belgian detective stood beside him, his eyes on the horizon, his mind already turning to the next mystery. Poirot, Hastings said, do you ever tire of it? The lies, the crimes, the endless puzzles. Poirot's smile was wistful. Never, Hastings. For as long as there are secrets, there will be those who seek to hide them, and those, like Hercule Poirot, who seek to uncover them. It is the order of things, no? As the launch cut through the waves, carrying them back to Senlis, Hastings felt a quiet admiration for his friend. The Sapphire yacht had been a stage for murder, but Poirot's genius had brought light to its shadows. The case was closed, the truth revealed, and the little grey cells had triumphed once more. The Sapphire yacht lay anchored under a sky now clear, his spite eyes scanning the horizon, his mind restless despite the case's apparent closure. Captain Arthur Hastings joined him, his own thoughts troubled by a nagging doubt that Poirot's revelation, however brilliant, had left some questions unanswered. "Poirot," Hastings said, his voice low against the gentle lapping of the waves, "you've done it again, solved the impossible. But I can't help feeling we've missed something. The other guests, their secrets, their motives, could there be more to this?" Poirot's mustache twitched, his gaze thoughtful. "Mon ami, your instincts, they are not without merit. The case of Dr. Crane is clear. The silencer, the bruise, the scratch, the note, all point to his guilt. Yet the human heart, it is complex. There are shadows of doubt, details that linger like echoes. We must ensure no thread remains unexamined." Hastings frowned, recalling the emotional turmoil of the previous hours. "You mean Lady Beatrice? Or perhaps Clara and Merryweather? Their secrets seem so personal. Could they be hiding something more sinister?" Poirot nodded, his hands clasped behind his back. "Précisément. The little grey cells. They are satisfied with the solution, but they do not rest. Let us revisit the clues, not to undo our work, but to ensure its completeness." They returned to the library,
where the clues remain on the table. A silent array of evidence. The pearl earring, the threatening note, the lipstick-stained cigarette butt, the monogrammed handkerchief, the smudged brandy glass, the notebook entry, and the metal fragment from the silencer. Poirot's eyes lingered on the earring, its luster catching the lamplight. "This earring," he said, "found beneath Sir Reginald's chair. Lady Beatrice claimed it fell during a visit before dinner, yet her hesitation, it suggests more." Hastings nodded. "And the cigarette butt with the lipstick. None of the women admitted to smoking on deck, but it was clearly planted to mislead us." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "Oui, and the handkerchief, Mr. Grayson's, found far from his cabin. These clues, they were meant to distract, but they also revealed the murderer's knowledge of the guests. Dr. Crane was clever, but was he alone in his deception?" Their conversation was interrupted by a soft knock. Miss Ellen Tate, the stewardess, stood at the door, her face pale and her hands clasped tightly. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice trembling, I need to tell you something. I didn't before because I was afraid, but now that Dr. Crane is caught, I can't keep silent." Poirot gestured for her to sit, his expression gentle but probing. "Speak, mademoiselle. The truth, it is always welcome." Ellen took a deep breath, her eyes darting to the door. "Last night, before the scream, I saw something else, not just the shadow at the stern. I saw Lady Beatrice near the master
cabin around midnight. She was pacing, looking upset. I didn't think much of it then, but after what you said about the earring, I thought you should know." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Merci, mademoiselle. This is most significant. Did you see her enter the cabin?" Ellen shook her head. "No, sir. She just stood there, then went back to her own cabin. I didn't want to say before, it felt like betraying her." Poirot dismissed her gently, then turned to Hastings. "The earring, the pacing, Lady Beatrice's story, it is incomplete. We must speak with her again." They found Lady Beatrice in her cabin, seated by a small writing desk, her face drawn but composed. She looked up as they entered, her eyes wary. "Monsieur Poirot, the case is solved, is it not? Why are you here?" Poirot bowed slightly. "Madame, there are details that trouble me. The earring found in your husband's cabin, you said it fell before dinner, yet you were seen near his cabin at midnight, pacing, distressed. Why?" Lady Beatrice's hands tightened on the desk, her voice low. I couldn't sleep. I went to speak with Reginald to beg him not to make his announcement. It wasn't about infidelity as you suggested, but money. He discovered irregularities in our accounts, losses I couldn't explain. I feared he'd blame me, ruin me, but he was already asleep, or so I thought. I didn't enter." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And the earring?" She hesitated, then sighed. "It must have fallen then. I was nervous adjusting my jewelry. I didn't notice." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "Merci, madame. Your candor is appreciated." As they left, Hastings whispered, "Do you believe her, Poirot? Could she have been involved?" Poirot's voice was thoughtful. "She hides much, but murder? No, I think not. Her fear was real, but it was of exposure, not guilt. Yet her presence at midnight, it complicates the timeline." Back on deck, Poirot paused by the railing, the sea stretching endlessly before them. "Hastings, consider the sequence. If Sir Reginald was killed on deck, as we deduced, and moved to the cabin, someone else may have seen or heard something. Lady Beatrice's pacing, Miss Tate's shadow, these suggest others were awake, moving. We must confirm the alibis once more." They sought out Mr. Julian Merriweather, whose earlier confession about his love for Clara Pembroke had shifted suspicion. He was in the saloon, sketching idly, his dark eyes wary as Poirot approached. "Monsieur Merriweather," Poirot said, "you were on deck until 1 a.m. Did you see him that night? Perhaps to reason with him?" Merriweather's jaw tightened. No, I stayed clear of him. Clara and I wanted to keep our secret, not confront him. As they left, Poirot murmured, He is truthful, I think, but guarded. The lovers, they protect each other, but their fear was of scandal, not murder. The night deepened, the yacht's lights casting a soft glow on the deck. Poirot's mind was a whirl of connections, his doubts a quiet undercurrent. Mon ami, he said, the case is solved, yet the shadows remain. We have caught the murderer, but the motives of others, Lady Beatrice's fear, Grayson's absence, the lover's secrecy, they weave a secondary web. We must ensure no accomplice lingers. Hastings nodded, his unease growing. Could Crane have had help? Poirot's eyes twinkled. It is possible, but unlikely. The silencer, the staging? It was a solitary act. Yet we must be vigilant. The Sapphire yacht holds no more secrets, but its passengers, they carry their burden still. As they prepared to retire, the distant hum of the police launch returning signaled the final chapter of their stay. Poirot's genius had triumphed, but the shadows of doubt lingered, a reminder that even in resolution, human nature remained a mystery. Chapter 13. The Unseen Thread. The Sapphire yacht lay bathed in the soft glow of dawn, its polished decks glistening with the remnants of the storm's rain, now evaporated under the rising sun. The sea was a tranquil expanse, its calm a stark contrast to the turmoil that had gripped the vessel over the past days. With Dr. Leonard Crane in custody and the police launch having departed, the guests moved with a tentative relief, their conversations subdued, their glances still laced with suspicion. Yet, for Hercule Poirot, the case, though solved, was not entirely closed. A faint thread of doubt lingered in his mind, a whisper that some detail, some unseen connection, remained unexplored. Captain Arthur Hastings, ever loyal, stood beside him on the upper deck, his own unease mirroring Poirot's quiet intensity. Poirot, Hastings said, his voice low as he watched the horizon, you've caught the murderer, and the evidence is airtight, but you're not satisfied, are you? There's something bothering you. Something about the other guests, perhaps. Poirot's green eyes gleamed, his moustache twitching slightly. Mon ami, you know me well. The little grey cells, they are content with Dr. Crane's guilt, the silencer fragment, the bruise, the scratch, the note, all aligned perfectly. Yet there is an unseen thread, a subtlety that eludes us. The motives of the others, Lady Beatrice's fear, Mr. Grayson's absence, the lover's secrecy, they form a tapestry of their own. We must ensure no shadow remains. Hastings frowned, his mind the smudged brandy glass, the notebook entry, the silencer fragment, and now Lady Beatrice's midnight pacing and Miss Ellen Tate's sighting of a shadow. Could there be an accomplice? He asked. Someone who helped Crane stage the scene. Poirot's expression was thoughtful. It is possible, Hastings, though unlikely. The crime was meticulous, the work of one mind. But the reactions of the others, their secrets, their hesitations, suggest they know more than they admit. Let us probe this thread, no? Their first task was to revisit Miss Ellen Tate, whose nervous revelations had been pivotal. They found her in the galley, arranging breakfast trays with a forced calm, her hands still trembling slightly. She started at their approach, her eyes wide with apprehension. Mademoiselle Tate, Poirot said, his tone gentle but firm. You have been most helpful, but I sense you hold something back. The shadow you saw at 5:30, can you describe it further? A silhouette? A movement? Anything? Ellen's lips quivered, and she glanced at the door as if expecting someone to interrupt. It was tall, sir, and quick. I only saw it for a moment, near the stern by the lifeboats. I thought it was Dr. Crane, but now I'm not sure. It could have been anyone. Poirot's eyes narrowed.
And Lady Beatrice, pacing at midnight, did you hear anything from the master cabin? A voice, a sound?" She shook her head, her voice barely a whisper. "No, sir. It was quiet, except for the storm starting. I didn't want to say before, but I heard footsteps later, around 4, near the crew's quarters. I thought it was one of the crew, but they were all asleep." Poirot's gaze was piercing. "Merci, mademoiselle. Your honesty is invaluable." As they left the galley, Hastings whispered, "Footsteps at 4. That's after Grayson's absence, before the shadow at 5:30. Could someone else have been moving about?" Poirot nodded. "Précisément. The timeline. It is critical. Let us speak with Mr. and Mrs. Grayson. Her revelation about his absence was a turning point, but there is more to learn." They found the Graysons in the saloon, seated apart, the tension between them palpable. Victor Grayson's face was set in a scowl, his gold watch clicking open and shut, while Evelyn sat with a lace handkerchief, her eyes downcast. Poirot addressed her first, his voice soft. "Madame Grayson, you spoke bravely of your husband's absence from 3 a.m. until nearly dawn. Can you recall anything else, perhaps where he went, or what he said upon returning?" Evelyn's hands trembled, and she glanced at her husband, who glared at her. I don't know where he went," she said, her voice
Half asleep, confused by her sleeping draught. "I had no reason to harm Reginald." Poirot's eyes flickered to the handkerchief in Evelyn's hands, the lace with the embroidered rose. "Madame, your handkerchief, did you have it with you that night?" Evelyn nodded, her eyes wide. "Yes, I always carry it. I dropped it during dinner, but I found it in my cabin later." Poirot's expression was unreadable. "And you, Monsieur Grayson? Your silk handkerchief with the initials V.G., you claim it was stolen. When did you last see it?" Grayson's jaw tightened. "Before dinner in my jacket pocket. I noticed it missing the next morning." As they left the saloon, Poirot murmured to Hastings, "The handkerchiefs, they are curious. One found, one lost, yet both point to deception. We must consider if someone else used them to confuse us." Their next stop was Miss Clara Pembroke and Mr. Julian Merriweather, who were together on the deck, their hands clasped, their faces drawn. Poirot addressed Clara first. "Mademoiselle, your love for Monsieur Merriweather was a secret Sir Reginald threatened to expose. Did you see anyone near his cabin that night, perhaps during your own sleepless moments?" Clara's eyes filled with tears. "No, Monsieur Poirot. I was in my cabin taking my sedative. I didn't leave until the scream." Merriweather's voice was sharp. "We've told you everything, Poirot. Clara's innocent and so am I. We had no part in this." Poirot nodded, his gaze lingering. "And yet, monsieur, you were on deck until 1. Did you see a handkerchief, perhaps? Or hear footsteps later in the night?" Merriweather shook his head. "Nothing. The storm was starting, and I was alone." As they walked away, Poirot's voice was low. "The lovers, they are truthful about their love, but their fear, it lingers. The unseen thread, Hastings, it connects them all." Back in the library, Poirot arranged the clues once more, his fingers pausing on the lipstick-stained cigarette butt. "This," he said, "is the anomaly. No woman admits to smoking, yet the lipstick is deliberate. Could it be a final red herring, placed not by Crane, but by another?" Hastings frowned. "Another? But Crane confessed. Why would someone else plant clues?" Poirot's eyes twinkled. To protect, to confuse, or to settle a score. The Sapphire Yacht is a web of motives, Hastings. Dr. Crane killed Sir Reginald, but the others, they played their parts knowingly or not. As the sun climbed higher, the yacht prepared to return to Saint-Ly, the guests packing their belongings, their relief tempered by lingering unease. Poirot's mind was still at work, chasing the unseen thread that tied the secrets together. Mon ami, he said, the case is closed, but the human heart, it remains a mystery. We must watch, for the truth hath
fully laid to rest, and Hastings knew that Poirot's vigilance would not waver until every shadow was dispelled. The Sapphire yacht glided smoothly toward the harbor of Senlis, its sleek form cutting through the calm sea, under a sky now ablaze with the golden hues of late afternoon. The storm had long passed, leaving the air crisp and the decks gleaming, yet an undercurrent of unease lingered among the guests, who moved about with the guarded caution of those who knew the truth, but feared its full weight. Hercule Poirot stood at the bow, his small frame silhouetted against the setting sun, his green eyes sharp with relentless curiosity that defined him. Captain Arthur Hastings stood beside him, his mind still grappling with the unseen thread Poirot had spoken of, a lingering doubt that suggested the mystery of Sir Reginald Ashbourne's murder was not yet fully resolved. "Poirot," Hastings said, his voice tinged with frustration, "you've caught Dr. Crane, and the evidence is undeniable. The silencer, the bruise, the note, everything fits. But you're still chasing something, aren't you? What is this unseen thread you keep mentioning?" Poirot's mustache twitched, his gaze fixed on the distant shore. "Mon ami, the little grey cells, they are never content with half-truths. Dr. Crane's plan for murder on the Sire. Walker to the eyes, this man is sight, the existive eyes." Hercule Poirot stood at the bow, his small frame silhouetted against the setting sun, his green eyes sharp with the relentless curiosity that defined him. Captain Arthur Hastings stood beside him, his mind still grappling with the unseen thread Poirot had spoken of, a lingering doubt that suggested the mystery of Sir Reginald Ashbourne's murder was not yet fully resolved. "Poirot," Hastings said, his voice tinged with frustration, "you've caught Dr. Crane, and the evidence is undeniable. The silencer, the bruise, the note, everything fits. But you're still chasing something, aren't you? What is this unseen thread you keep mentioning?" Poirot's mustache twitched, his gaze fixed on the distant shore. "Mon ami, the little grey cells, they are never content with half-truths. Dr. Crane is guilty, oui. The silencer fragment, the bruise, the scratch, the threatening note, all confirm his crime. Yet there are ripples in the water, Hastings. Subtle disturbances that suggest another hand stirred the pot. The lipstick-stained cigarette, the handkerchiefs, Lady Beatrice's midnight pacing, these are not mere coincidences. We must find the final pieces." Hastings
frowned, his notepad tucked under his arm. "You think someone else was involved? An accomplice, perhaps?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Not an accomplice, perhaps, but a shadow, a secondary motive, a hidden act that weaves into the crime. Let us return to the clues in the timeline, for the truth lies in their alignment." They retreated to the yacht's library, where the evidence remained. The pearl earring, the threatening note, the lipstick-stained cigarette butt, Victor Grayson's monogrammed handkerchief, the smudged brandy glass, the notebook entry, the silencer fragment, and the new details of Lady Beatrice's pacing at midnight and Ellen Tate's sighting of footsteps at 4 a.m. Poirot arranged them on the table, his fingers lingering to the cigarette butt, its faint red smear a persistent enigma. "This cigarette," Poirot said, "is the key to our unseen thread. No woman aboard admits to smoking on deck, yet the lipstick suggests intent, a deliberate misdirection. But whose?" Their first move was to confront Lady Beatrice once more, her earlier admission about financial irregularities and her midnight pacing raising questions. They found her in the saloon, seated alone, her face pale but composed,
her pearl necklace now missing one earring. Poirot bowed slightly, his tone gentle but incisive. "Madame," he began, "you were seen near your husband's cabin at midnight, distressed about his planned announcement. You spoke of financial losses. Was there another involved in these irregularities?" Lady Beatrice's hands clenched, her voice low. I suspected Victor Grayson. He handled our investments, and there were discrepancies, large sums unaccounted for. Reginald believed Grayson was embezzling. His announcement was to confront him, to demand an audit. Hastings' eyes widened. "Grayson? That explains his anger, his absence from his cabin." Poirot nodded. "Oui, but not his guilt in murder. Dr. Crane acted alone, driven by his own secret, yet Grayson's actions, they cast a shadow." They sought Victor Grayson next, finding him on the deck, his gold watch clicking nervously. Poirot's voice was calm but probing. "Monsieur Grayson, your handkerchief was found on deck, and your wife confirmed your absence from 3 to nearly dawn. Lady Beatrice speaks of financial irregularities. Did you meet Sir Reginald that night to silence his accusations?" Grayson's face reddened, his voice a growl. "I told you, I was in my cabin. Those losses were market fluctuations, not theft. Reginald was paranoid, seeing betrayal where there was none." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "And the murder, but in deception."
Next, they spoke with Mrs. Evelyn Grayson, her frail form trembling in the saloon. "Madame," Poirot said, "your husband's absence troubled you. Did he speak of meeting anyone that night?" Evelyn's voice was a whisper, her lace handkerchief twisted in her hands.
He said he had to fix a mistake. Something about papers. I thought it was business, but he was so angry. When he returned, he was calmer, but wouldn't speak of it."
Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And your handkerchief, the lace with the rose, was it ever on deck?" She shook her head.
"No, I kept it with me. I found it in my cabin after dinner."
Poirot dismissed her gently, then turned to Hastings. "The handkerchiefs, the cigarette, they are distractions, but from whom? Let us speak with the lovers." Clara Pembroke and Julian Merriweather were together in the dining room, their faces drawn but defiant. Poirot addressed Clara first. "Mademoiselle, your secret love was a motive, but not for murder. Did you see or hear anything unusual that night? Perhaps near the deck?" Clara's voice trembled.
"No, I was in my cabin asleep. The sedative, I didn't wake until the scream."
Merriweather's tone was sharp. "We've told you, Poirot. We hid our love, not a crime. I was on deck until 1, but I saw nothing." Poirot's gaze lingered. "And the cigarette, with lipstick, could it be yours, mademoiselle?" Clara flushed.
"I don't smoke, Monsieur Poirot. Neither does Julian."
As they left, Poirot murmured, "The cigarette, it is the final piece. No one claims it, yet it was placed with purpose." Back in the library, Poirot's eyes gleamed as he held the cigarette butt. "Hastings, consider. The cigarette was found near the stern, where Miss Tate saw a shadow at 5:30. Dr. Crane disposed of the silencer there. But the cigarette, it is not his. It bears lipstick, a woman's touch, yet none admit to it. There is one we have overlooked." Hastings frowned. "Miss Tate? But she's just a stewardess, and she was terrified." Poirot's smile was faint. "Précisément. Her fear, her observations, she is more than she seems. Let us speak with her." They found Ellen Tate in the crew's quarters, her hands trembling as she polished silver. "Mademoiselle," Poirot said,
You saw a shadow, heard footsteps. You are observant, yet silent. Did you place the cigarette on deck? Ellen's face paled, her voice a whisper. I did, sir. I found it in the galley, dropped by someone after dinner. I thought it was Miss Pembroke's, so I placed it on deck to—
Anyone's. Poirot nodded, dismissing her gently. As they returned to the deck, he said, "The final piece, Hastings. Miss Tate's act was to shield Clara, but the cigarette's origin remains a mystery. It suggests another hand, perhaps not in murder, but in manipulation. Grayson's financial misdeeds, Lady Beatrice's fears, they are secondary threads, not the crime itself." As the yacht neared Saint-Ly, Poirot's mind was at rest, the unseen thread revealed as a web of minor deceptions, not murder. "The case is complete, mon ami," he said. "Dr. Crane acted alone, but the others, they wove their own lies, protecting their secrets." The harbour loomed, and Hastings felt the weight lift. Though the shadows of human nature lingered, a puzzle Poirot had unravelled with unmatched brilliance. Chapter 15. The Departure. The Sapphire yacht docked at the harbour of Saint-Ly as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm, golden glow over the quaint coastal village. The sea, now a serene expanse, reflected the fading light, and the air was filled with the mingled scents of salt and pine from the shore. The guests, their faces etched with a mix of relief and exhaustion, gathered their belongings, preparing to disembark, their ordeal aboard the yacht drawing to a close. Hercule Poirot stood on the upper deck, his small, immaculate figure a beacon of calm amidst the lingering shadows of the mystery. Captain Arthur Hastings stood beside him, his heart lighter but still touched by the weight of the secrets uncovered and the truths revealed. "Poirot," Hastings said, his voice soft against the gentle lapping of the waves. "It's over, isn't it? Dr. Crane is in custody, the cigarette's mystery explained, the threads tied up. Yet I feel unsettled, as though the yacht still holds some secret." Poirot's green eyes twinkled, his moustache curving slightly. "Mon ami, your sensitivity to the human heart. It is a gift. The Sapphire yacht has yielded its greatest secret, the murder of Sir Reginald Ashbourne, solved by the little grey cells. Yet the smaller secrets, the fears and lies of the others, they linger, no? It is the nature of life. Truth brings resolution, but not always peace." Hastings nodded, his gaze drifting to the guests assembling on the deck below. Lady Beatrice Ashbourne stood alone, her black dress stark against the golden light, her face composed but distant, as though grappling with the loss of her husband and the financial ruin he had uncovered. Clara Pembroke and Julian Merryweather stood hand in hand, their love now open, but tempered by the scandal that had threatened it. Victor Grayson, his bluster subdued, helped his wife Evelyn down the gangplank, her frail form leaning on him, their marriage strained but enduring. Miss Ellen Tate, the stewardess, moved among the crew, her youthful face relieved but marked by the weight of her role in the truth's unveiling. Poirot gestured to
In his leather case, the pearl earring, the threatening note, the lipstick-stained cigarette butt, the monogrammed handkerchief, the smudged brandy glass, the notebook entry, and the silencer fragment. Each played its part, he said, but it was the human element, the fear, the loyalty, the desperation that wove them together. Dr. Crane killed to protect his reputation, but the others, they hid to protect their hearts. Hastings frowned, recalling Miss Tate's confession about the cigarette. That cigarette, Poirot. Ellen placed it to protect Clara, but we never found its true owner. Does it matter? Poirot's smile was faint. It matters only to the little grey cells, Hastings. The cigarette was a distraction, perhaps dropped carelessly by a guest or crew member, its lipstick a coincidence seized by Ellen's well-meaning heart.
Its origin is unimportant now, for it led us to the truth through her candor. They descended to the main deck, where the guests were preparing to leave. Lady Beatrice approached Poirot, her voice low but steady. "Monsieur Poirot, I owe you thanks. You uncovered the truth, though it brings me little comfort. Reginald's death, it was senseless." Poirot bowed slightly. "Madame, the truth is rarely comforting, but it is just. Your husband's secrets, they drove another to madness, but you are free to rebuild." She nodded, her eyes glistening, and turned to board the waiting launch to shore. Clara and Merryweather followed, their faces bright with the hope of a future unburdened by secrecy. Grayson and Evelyn moved silently, their rift unspoken but palpable. Miss Tate lingered, offering Poirot a shy smile. "Thank you, sir, for believing me. I was so afraid." Poirot's eyes softened. "Courage, mademoiselle, is in speaking when fear bids you silent. You have done well." As the guests departed, Poirot and Hastings remained on deck, watching the village of St. Lys come alive with evening lights. The police had taken Dr. Crane's statement, the evidence secured, and the case officially closed. Yet Poirot's mind, ever restless, seemed to linger on the yacht. "Mon ami," he said, "the Sapphire Yacht is a microcosm of life. Elegance hiding chaos, truth buried beneath lies. We have restored order, but the human heart, it continues its dance." Hastings smiled, his admiration for Poirot undimmed. "You make it sound so poetic, Poirot. But it's grim work, isn't it? Uncovering all that darkness." Poirot's gaze turned to the sea, his voice philosophical. "It is, Hastings, the case." The Sapphire Yacht receded into the twilight, its gleaming hull a fading memory, its secrets laid bare by Poirot's genius. As they reached St. Lys, Poirot paused on the quay, his eyes on the horizon. "Another mystery solved, mon ami," he said. "But the world, it is full of puzzles waiting for Hercule Poirot. Shall we find the next?" Hastings laughed, the weight of the yacht lifting. "With you, Poirot, I'm ready for anything." The two friends walked into the village, the sea behind them, the stars above, and the promise of new adventures ahead. The Sapphire Yacht had been a stage for murder, but Poirot's little grey cells had brought light to its shadows, and the truth, as always, had prevailed.